Hello, welcome back. I'm Benjamin Williams, and today we're going to be doing another Boson NetSim lab. Today we're going to be doing AAA authentication, so that's authorization, authentication, and then accounting. That's what the AAA stand for. We're in the security section of Boson NetSim today. I always like to do the security labs. They're a little bit more command intensive. You have to really know the CLI to configure AAA. So this is one that I like to lab up. And I always end up learning something new every time. But let's go ahead and get into the lab. The objective is to configure P1R1 to use terminal access controller access control systems plus TechX plus server to authenticate P1R2 as it attempts to establish a point-to-point protocol PPP connection with password authentication protocol PAP authentication across the serial link. Sorry about that. So this is our lab topology. We have our TechX Plus server right here. This is going to be authenticating everything. We have our switch connected to the TechX Plus server. And then we have two routers going out each interface on this switch. We have a frame relay connection. And I'm going to have to do some more research on frame relay. But from what I understand, it's like some type of WAN technology that supports LAN communication. So that's what I understand, and it's connected with the serial serial connection. Same thing with these routers that connect up. And then we have a ISDN. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but what I can kind of see is it's probably some type of WAN technology that's able to communicate between these two routers, and they're connected. Looks like by a serial connection as well. So we already read through the command list and all of the descriptions, and I did read through the IP address information as well. So we're going to do the same mode as we usually do. We're going to keep the topology up here in the top left. We're going to do all of our instructions on the top right, and we're going to be doing our commands down here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get into it. It says task 1, prepare for AAA. It says on P1R1, configure the appropriate IP address. Refer to the IP address table using the default encapsulation of high-level data link control, HDLC, and a clock rate of 1000 kilobits per second on the serial 01 interface. So we're here now. So let's kind of go up some so we can see our IP address information. And let's do an enable. Preferably exec mode, conf T for global config, and let's go into interface serial 01. If I can spell 01. Cool. All right. Now it says configure the address. So IP address, we're going to do 10.1.1.1, 255.255.255.0 because it's a /24. And hit enter there. Let's do a no shut just to make sure we enable that interface. So it says configure a clock rate of 1000 kilobits per second. So let's do well, first it says use the default encapsulation. So let's just make sure our encapsulation is right. So let's do encapsulation. We want to use HDLC. There we go. All right, got that. And then let's do our clock rate. So let's do clock rate. And we want, it says 1000 kilobits per second. So that'll be the first option. So that'll be, how many zeros is that? 6, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So that's right. And we see that our line protocol interfaces now came up in the up state. It was due to the clock rate change. They match on both sides now, so they're able to communicate. So on P1R2, configure the appropriate address on the serial 00 interface. So let's go to P1R2. Let's go to enable. Enable conf T. Wow. Conf T. There we go. And then we want to go into the interface serial 00. And let's do an IP address of 10.1.1.2 and /24. Perfect. Alrighty. So let's do a do show IP interface brief. And we see that serial 00 interfaces in the upstate, it has the correct IP address. So let's move on. From P1R1, ping the TechX plus server, which is on the 10.2.2.200, that's its IP address, to ensure that connectivity exists. If the ping does not succeed, you should verify the configurations you performed in the preceding steps. So let's go to P1R1 now, and let's do a do ping 10.2.2.200. See what happens. We may need to check our configuration. May have to do a little bit of troubleshooting. Okay. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. What is going on here? So it says ping the 10.2.200. So that's what I just did, and it's not, the pings are unsuccessful. So I may need to do a do show IP route. See our routing table. So we don't have any connections to the 10.2.2 network. So that's the reason why we can't ping. So, let me make sure my address is right over here. Yes, it is. Yes. Let me go back one more time. And let's do a exit. I should just did an end. Let's do ping 10.2.2.200. So we're not able to ping. So, let me make sure I did all of the configurations that it wanted. Right, I did that. Oh, okay. I didn't see that it wanted me to configure the fast Ethernet 00 interface right here. Okay, so that's what the problem is. I need to configure the fast Ethernet 00 interface. Let's go into conf-t. Let's go into interface. Let's go up so I can see the IP address information. Yes, I did not do that. So let's do fast Ethernet 00, and let's do an IP address of 10.2.2.1, and let's do a /24 network mask. Let's do a no shut. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. Yes, so now we should, let's do a do show IP route. Yes, we have a connection to the 10.2.2.0 network now. So now if we do a do ping, and we want to ping 10.2.2.200, all of them are successful. Perfect. All right, so on P1R1 and P1R2, configure RIP v2 and advertise the 10.0.0.0 network. So let's go here. Let's do an exit. Let's do a router RIP. And let's do version 2. And let's do a network statement. Let me take caps off. Network. And we want to 10.0.0.0. And let's go over to P1R2. And let's go to exit. Let's go router RIP. Do the same configuration we just did, version 2. And we want to advertise the network of 10.0.0.0. Perfect. All right, so task 1 is done now, and it says configure AAA and PPP authentication. So it says on P1R1, enable AAA. So let's do that. Let's go over to P1R1 and let's do a exit. Well, let me do a do show. I want to make sure that RIP is up and running. Okay, let me do an end. Let's do show RIP. No, we can't do that. So show IP protocols. Okay, yep. So RIP is running. This one to make sure it's advertising the 10.0.0 network, which it is. So perfect. All right, so let's go into conf T and let's do an AAA new model. And it says enable P1R1 to use a TACX Plus server. Configure the shared key to be Cisco and set the timeout to 15 seconds. So let's do a TACX server. We want to configure the actual host first. So what is our host IP address? Let me go down from over here. So pull up the address table. And we want to configure it to be 10.2.2.200. That's our TACX Plus IP address. Let's go back up, put the topology here. Perfect. All right. Now it wants me to configure a shared key. So TACX server key. You want it to be Cisco. And let's do a TACX server. Do a timeout of 15 seconds. All right. And it says on P1R1, create a AAA rule named AAA Lab for PPP authentication. The rule should require that authentication be attempted first through a TACX Plus server and then through a local authentication if the server is unavailable. So let's go here and let's do AAA. Let's do wants us to do an authentication. And we want to create a AAA named AAA Lab for PPP authentication. So let's do PPP. And let's name our thing AAA Lab. Let's do TACX. And local for the local authentication. If the TACX is unavailable. Perfect. So it says on P1R1, shut down the serial 01 interface and enable PPP authentication. So let's go into interface serial. My computer is kind of okay. Serial 01. And let's do a shut it down. And let's do encapsulation. And it wants the encapsulation to be PPP. Okay. Now it says on P1R1, specify PPP PAP authentication for the serial interface using the AAA Lab rule list created earlier. Configure the PAP sent username to be P1R1 with a password of Cisco and enable the interface. So first, it says specify PPP PAP authentication for the serial interface using AAA Lab. So let's go PPP PAP sent username. And the sent username should be, well, what should it be? It should be, okay, should it be AAA Lab? Password. Okay, let me get some help here. Okay, so no, I guess the sent username is supposed to be P1R1. And I'm going to check this just to make sure. P1R1. And the password should be Cisco. I believe that's correct, but let me make sure. I don't want to make any mistakes here. So, no, this is not correct. So it wants me to first enter PPP authentication with PAP. Let me get some context sensitive help. So PPP, and then you do authentication. Okay. And then you do PAP. And then you do AAA. Oh, AAA Lab. Okay. Then you do PPP PAP. with a sent username of P1R1 and a password of Cisco. Okay, now let's do a no shut, and the interface is back up. So it says on P1R2, configure the serial 00 interface to use PAP encapsulation and configure the PAP username to be AAA lab with a password of Cisco. P1R1 will receive this username and password and forward them to the TechX Plus server for authentication. So it says on P1R2, it says configure the serial 0. So let's go into interface serial 00. And let's do PPP authentication. Let's do PAP. And the sent username should be AAA lab. And let me make sure that's correct too, because I think this is wrong. And I don't want to. Let's go here. So first we're supposed to do encapsulation PPP. So let me backspace because we were about to do that wrong. So let's go encapsulation PPP. And then we want to do PPP PAP sent username to be AAA lab and the password to be Cisco. Now it says on P1R2, specify PAP authentication for the serial interface. Create a username of P1R1 with a password of Cisco. P1R2 will perform local authentication based on PAP sent username on P1R1 and password of Cisco transmitted by P1R1. So on P1R2, specify PAP authentication. So let's go. Where's my? Okay. Let's go PAP. Okay, so you have to do PPP PAP and create a sent user name of P1R1 and a password of Cisco. Let me make sure that is correct. So no, that was not going to be correct neither. So I'm learning a lot in this lab, and I like to do this lab because I always learn something new. And I like to continue to just work through the problems and just learn each and every time that I get on one of these. So PPP authentication, and then we want to do PAP. Perfect. And then let's do a username of P1R1 and a password of Cisco. Alrighty. So it says, is authentication attempted against the TechX Plus server? Is it successful? What indicates that authentication is attempted? So, okay, so we just got a syslog message down here, and it says that a line protocol for the interface serial 00 interface is now in the upstate. And I think it came up in the upstate because the authentication was confirmed by the TechX Plus server. So let me make sure that's correct. It says authentication is attempted against the TechX Plus server and is successful. The following message displays on the console of P1R2 indicates that authentication is attempted. So, okay, that's right. So it says on P1R1, verify the state of the serial 01 interface. What happens to the serial 01 interface after authentication succeeds? So let's go to P1R1 and let's do a do show IP interface brief. And we can see that our serial 01 interface is in the upstate, which is what we want. So what happens? Yeah, so I did our authentication succeed. The interface comes up. So it says configure failover behavior. So on P1R1, shut down the first fast Ethernet 00 interface. So let's go to P1R1. We're already on it. Let's go into interface fast Ethernet 00, and let's shut it down. So let's do a shut. All right. So it says on P1R1, shut down the serial 01 interface and then re-enable that interface. So let's go into interface serial 01 and let's shut down and let's do a no shut. So it says, is authentication attempted against the TechX Plus server? Is it successful? So I would say it is, because now we can see we didn't even do anything to the serial 01 interface and it came back in the upstate. So I think that's because we made that local username and password. And now since it can't authenticate against the TechX Plus server, it's going to authenticate locally. And since it did, it came up back, the serial 01 interface came back in the upstate. So let's see if that's correct. I think that's correct. And it says right here, authentication is attempted against the TechX Plus server, but fails. The local database is also consulted, but no entry for user AAA exists. So authentication is, so it says it fails. Okay, so it's saying it failed, but my interface came back up, so I'm not sure why. So let's say on P1R1, display the state of the serial 01 interface. So let's do that. Let's do a do. Oh, accidentally hit enter up here, which I didn't mean to. Let's go down here and let's do a do show IP interface brief. Yeah, so my serial interface, the 01 interface is in the upstate. So it says shut down the serial 01 interface and create a username of AAA lab with the password of Cisco. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Interface serial 01. And it says shut it down. Let's do a shut. And let's do an exit. Let's do a username of AAA lab and a password Cisco. All right. Now let's re-enable. So let's do a no shut. Oh, first I need to go into interface serial 01. And let's do a no shut. All right. And on P1R1, observe the status of the serial 01 interface. What do you notice? So it just came back in the upstate. So let's see if it stays in the upstate. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. And we haven't had any syslog messages saying that it went to the downstate. So for right now, it looks like everything is good. Let's run that one more time. I mean, you would see a syslog message if it did go to the downstate. So everything is good. So it says on P1R1, observe the status of the serial 01 interface. What do you notice? I see that it's in the upstate, which is what we want. Yeah, so it says indicated by the status of the serial 01 interface changing to up and up as shown in the sample output. So that's what we want. So let's grade it. I did get some help with this lab right here, but I learned a lot. So hopefully we got everything correct. Yeah, so we did. Learned a lot in this lab. I always love doing this lab because, like I said, each and every time I always learn something new. So this is a very good lab right here. I appreciate you guys for watching this one. See you in the next one.